Danny Heatley was a force with the Atlanta Thrashers before a blockbuster trade made him an Ottawa Senator. But from the moment he landed in Canada's capital, he was a superstar. Playing alongside Jason Spezza and Daniel Alfredsson, Heatley put up 50 goals and 100 points in each of his first 2 seasons, earning him a gigantic extension in the summer of 2007 to keep him in Ottawa until 2014. His next 2 seasons were merely all-star level, a step back, but he's still one of the very best offensive players in the league. In June of 2009, Heatley decided he needed a change, putting in a trade request seemingly out of nowhere. In a conference call months later, Heatley will say he put in the request because of a diminished role with the Senators. It seems ridiculous on the surface. Heatley still averaged over 20 minutes per game in the 2009 season, played a ton on the power play, etc. But if you look at his games after new coach Corey Cluston took command, there is a small but significant cut in ice time. It's still first-line minutes, but he isn't making this up out of thin air. There's a rift, at least in Heatley's mind. Across the country, Steve Tambellini is headed into his first full offseason as Edmonton's GM and is sick of his team being mediocre. He's already fired his inherited coach Craig McTavish, but he needs something else to drag this team out of the middle. Edmonton doesn't have much talent depth. Their first line has been overtaxed for years. If they could let someone like Sean Horkoff, Ales Hemsky, or Dustin Penner slide down to the second line, the ripple effect throughout the lineup would be massive. When Steve Tambellini heard Danny Heatley was on the market, his eyes were the size of saucers. Danny Heatley would completely overhaul this team. Imagine him with a dynamic passer like Hemsky, him as the focal point of the entire offense. He would be, undoubtedly, the most talented player in the organization since Pronger. Steve Tambellini, wanting to strike while the iron is hot, puts in an offer and Ottawa says yes. Heatley says no. Well, he didn't say no. He just inferred, as put by David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, Edmonton is his last choice as an NHL destination, other than Ottawa. Danny Heatley has a full no-movement clause. No trade will go through unless he gives the okay. If there are any other offers on the table, Heatley won't be headed to Edmonton. Much to the chagrin of Tambellini, his offer to Ottawa leaks out. Ladislav Smid, Penner, and Andrew Cogliano. A hefty price tag, but not an unreasonable one, though it certainly breeds some awkwardness between the 3 players and management. As more offers come into Ottawa, it becomes clear that Heatley won't be coming to Edmonton now or likely ever, given the bridges burned, particularly with the fans. It just keeps happening. When is someone going to want to be here? Well, at least here at the draft, the Oilers don't have to worry about that. And with the 10th pick, the Oilers take Magnus Paajarvi. Paajarvi's size, speed, and mature style of play allowed him to break into the top league in his native Sweden at just 16. According to Jim Matheson, the Oilers were on cloud 9 to draft the winger, but they didn't think there was a chance he made it past the Kings at 5. But when LA took center Braden Shen, it opened the door for Paajarvi to fall right into their laps. The Oilers snagged Paajarvi's teammate at Timrå, Anton Lander, in the second round, praised by elite prospects for his leadership and defense, having served as the captain of Sweden's U18 national team. Also on day 2 of the draft, the Oilers make what seems to be a completely confounding trade, shipping off 25-year-old Kyle Brodziak and a 6th-round pick to Minnesota in exchange for a 4th and a 5th-round pick. The return is close to nothing for a player that had been fairly effective in his small role. Tambellini said to the Canadian press that he had too many bodies at forward. Okay, I guess, but isn't this the kind of player the Oilers should want? Anyway, so long, Brodziak. We here in Edmonton have to keep Zach Stortini in the lineup to roll out for 7 minutes a night. Free agency comes next, and it looks like Dwayne Rollison is probably going to sign elsewhere. Oh well, he was heading into his age 40 season, and his years are bound to catch up with him sooner rather than later. Maybe having a younger goalie to pair with Delorier could be good, and there are plenty of options. While I doubt the Oilers want Ty Conklin back, a guy like Craig Anderson seems like a great fit. He was terrific for Florida as a backup over the past couple seasons, with a .928 save percentage in 53 games over 3 years. He seems like the kind of guy that... They signed who? For how long? The Oilers have signed 36-year-old Nikolai Habibulin to a 4-year contract worth $3.75 million per year. To be fair, he was really good last year with the upstart Blackhawks. But you're rolling the aging curve dice again like you were with Rolison, just with a player with a less consistent track record. The move seems especially garish when Rolison and Anderson signed shorter deals for less money per year. It's a distinctly win-now move given the longer term for an aging player. Give more years to lower a cap hit, I get it, but the Oilers don't sign anyone. They don't even re-sign last year's hit rental Alash Kodalik. Alright, I guess they just have a lot of RFAs to re-sign, which they do, getting both Smead and Grebeshkov under contract. The Grebeshkov contract looks like it could be a mistake, signing him for a 1-year, $3.15 million contract after a nice season that will walk him right to free agency. It's definitely a gamble for both sides, but we'll have to see how the young defenseman can do on his prove-it contract. Then everyone just watches and waits as the Oilers do nothing. Finally, in September, Edmonton signs former Oiler Mike Comrie, mending some bridges between the fans, management, and player that had been burned to the ground during one of Kevin Lowe's biggest gaffes. In 2003, after some strong seasons with the Oilers to start his career, Comrie, despite being a hometown kid, made it clear to the Oilers that he had no interest in re-signing as an RFA. The young forward had been at the center of contract shenanigans before, slipping through a loophole known as the Mike Van Ryn rule to jump directly to unrestricted free agency. Comrie was drafted out of college and was a Hobey Baker finalist as a sophomore, but by leaving Michigan and spending just one season in the WHL as a 20-year-old, it would nullify the Oilers' draft rights. Was Comrie way too good for the WHL? Yes, absolutely, but his shocking stat lines would pave a path to whatever team he wanted. The Oilers paid up before the player hit the market, but nearly losing a guy that looked like a can't-miss prospect was frightening. Once he joined the Oilers, Comrie had drawn some critiques from the Edmonton faithful for perceived inconsistency and effort issues, so when he held out to start the 2003-2004 season, the distaste was amplified. Lowe hashed out a deal. Comrie would head to the Ducks for a first-round pick and a top-tier prospect. The deal was all but done, but Lowe, in his infinite wisdom, demanded Comrie give back $2.5 million in signing bonuses to buy himself out of his contract. Comrie told Lowe to kick rocks, so the trade fell through, and the centerman was eventually sent to Philadelphia for Jeff Woywitka, a first-round pick that became Rob Schremp, and a third-round pick that became Dan Sivert. Pieces that would boil down to basically nothing. In fact, there goes Rob on waivers now. The prospect Anaheim offered? Future league MVP Corey Perry. This whole story is to say that Edmonton fans are apprehensive to say the least about bringing Comrie back into the fold. It's a pretty obvious message from management. Look, this guy who did everything he could to leave the organization is back, they say, jingling their keys ineffectively at the fanbase. The big signings of the offseason being a different geriatric goalie and a guy the fans don't really like that much doesn't really inspire much confidence. Comrie does win some fans back in the preseason, slotting in well to the top 6. 4 assists in a fight against Florida bring Rexall Place to their feet, chanting the hometown kid's name.
Too bad his dad isn't here to see it. I'm sure he'd be excited.
Comrie is coming off a down year, and it's easy to joke about why he was signed, but he's a good player. He can contribute to this team as a secondary scorer. Opening night is a battle with the Flames. Fights break out, one between fighters Stortini and Brandon Prust, and one between less likely combatants Sam Gagner and Craig Conroy. Khabibulin lets in the first shot of the season from former Oiler Curtis Glencross, but the Oilers storm back from a 3-1 deficit to tie the game. With only a minute left, Khabibulin boots the puck trying to play it, and David Moss slides it into the yawning cage. A tough start for the Bulin Wall. The Oilers then split a couple shootouts, including another mean-spirited game with the Flames where Sheldon Souray gets the worst of a nasty collision with Jerome McGinley. Souray will be out for a month. He's coming off his first healthy season in Edmonton where he was a force, so hopefully this doesn't become a trend again. Starting in Game 4, when Khabibulin steals a victory from Montreal, the Oilers catch fire and win 5 of their next 6. In the last game of the stretch, coach Pat Quinn tries a new look on the top line. Penner and Hemsky have been soaring to start the year, and their longtime center Horkoff has struggled to keep up. Quinn slots in Sam Gagner, and the new line catches a blaze against the Blue Jackets as Hemsky and Penner rack up 5 points each, and Gagner pitches in 3 as the Oilers erase a 4-1 deficit and torture old friend Matthew Garon. I do unfortunately have to break some bad news. These wins, even with their new line, aren't sustainable. They're shooting an astounding 18% and getting .935 goaltending. They're not going to have a 111.5 PDO throughout the season. But you can take the improvement in goal as a good sign. This is the season they're supposed to be getting surplus value out of Khabibulin's contract, so he's holding up his end of the bargain so far, with Jeff Delorier serving as a solid backup. Over the next 12 games, the Oilers put up a PDO of 96.3. They win 2. Penner and Hemsky are doing it alone now. We unfortunately need to talk about Sean Horkoff and, frankly, the entire center depth. Horkoff has always been a fringe first-line center with an ability to roll with strong wingers, but this season he hasn't looked like he can hang. Gagner hasn't either. Man, this guy. He's very young still, and he shows flashes of brilliance like he did in his first 10 games with 4 goals and 6 assists, but he just hits ruts like he did in his next 10 games with just 1 assist. Comrie, O'Sullivan, and Cogliano can all play center but are much more effective on the wing, so the other center roles fall to Gilbert Brulé and recent AHL call-up Ryan Potulny. It's just an army of guys that are better as either wingers or bottom 6 centers. The bad stretch is not the worst of the news. Mike Comrie has mono. He'll miss months after a solid start to the year. Ales Hemsky missed a pair of games in early November with a shoulder injury, but he comes back and the Oilers log a couple of wins as their star puts up 6 points in as many games.
Penner breaks in and a chance for Hemsky to the backhand. He scores! Oh my!
Then, in a game against the Kings, Michael Handzus cross-checks a vulnerable Hemsky into the boards at an awkward angle, torquing his neck and shoulder. Hemsky's done for the year. This isn't just awful news for the spiraling Oilers. It's an Olympic year, and Hemsky was positioned to be a major contributor for the bronze medal defending Czechs. At just 26 years old, this injury marks the end of Ales Hemsky's prime. That's not the end of the injury trouble. Khabibulin, who has been middling after an awful start and a strong resurgence, has been scratched seemingly out of nowhere. He's been a workhorse throughout his career, starting 70 games on 3 occasions and 60 games on 3 more, so his absence is puzzling. It's soon revealed that he has a back injury that will require surgery. He, too, is done for the year. Unlike the Hemsky injury, there is a silver lining, however thin, to the expensive veteran goalie needing complicated surgery 18 games into his tenure with the team. Khabibulin's absence opens the door for top goalie prospect Devan Dubnyk. The 23-year-old former first-round pick has been biding his time in juniors and the minor leagues, putting up strong numbers wherever he's been. While Delorier has the makings of a strong backup, 1B guy, Dubnyk, though unproven, has a much higher ceiling. But it's Delorier who grabs the opportunity by the horns, dazzling in net while the Oilers win 5 straight in early December. With a 15-13-4 record, this team is right on track to finish their standard 10th in the West with 87 points. Things have just looked a bit more gruesome getting there. Their goal differential at 5-on-5 is +6, that's outperforming their expected goals differential of -2.4 since they've been shooting at such a high clip. It's in the lucky but not insane category. Maybe I've been too hard on this team. Horkoff is finding his footing, and Brulé, at long last, seems to have clicked in the NHL with 21 points in 29 games. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but they're keeping the door open for a late-season run like they've put together in the past. There is just the faintest glimmer of hope. Have you ever heard of 3 Mile Island?
The potential is there for the ultimate risk of a meltdown at the 3 Mile Island atomic power plant outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
The Oilers lose 7 straight, and the goaltending has become a major issue. Dubnyk is not ready, and Delorier is not much better, as each of them get thumped in some absolute clunkers. It's not like the team's scoring, mustering only 12 goals, 6 of them are by 2 guys, Ryan Potolny and Robert Nilsson, and there's a problem arising with the latter. Nilsson will be 25 in January, and it's probably time to admit he is what he is. An extremely skilled player that can't play in the bottom 6 but isn't really good enough to play in the top 6. There really just isn't a place for him in a good team's lineup. Given he was the centerpiece of Edmonton's return for Ryan Smith, his stalling development hurts even more. The Oilers get a reprieve from losing as they beat the also very bad Maple Leafs, taking advantage of a Vesa Toskala start in net. Patrick O'Sullivan was quoted in the AP game recap saying, "It's a good feeling. Now we don't have to think about the fact we've lost a number of games in a row. Now we can think about the things that we did well. We're in a difficult spot right now. It's desperation time, really, for our team." Patrick, I fear you'll be thinking about losing a bunch of games in a row again very soon. 13 more losses. After a particularly gruesome 6-0 mauling at the hands of the Avalanche, where they fell victim to a Craig Anderson shutout, Pat Quinn declared that his team sucked hind banana, while Sean Horkoff gave a downtrodden quote found in the AP recap. "This is unacceptable. There has to be a change," Horkoff said with his head between his hands. "This is frustrating. It's the same thing every night." In the third period of loss 13, a 6-1 drubbing at the hands of the hated Flames, Souray challenges Jarome Iginla, the man who injured him early in the year, to a fight. Souray breaks his hand, ending his season. The defenseman would say later to John Scott that he didn't even particularly want to fight Iginla, but assistant coach Tom Rennie told him that if he wanted to get even, now was the time. We'll come back to this. It gets worse. It's the lowly Hurricanes that mercifully allow the streak to end as prospect defenseman Alex Plant picks up his first point in the NHL. But even this game, they manage a Corsi for percentage of 32, which is painfully bad. This team is painfully bad. They shut out the Flyers 1-0 to build a 2-game winning streak. Who cares? This team is going to sell at the deadline. They're going to get worse. After another nasty stretch where the Oilers picked up only 1 win in a marathon shootout against the Kings, they don't lose again for nearly 3 weeks. Is that because the Olympics are going on and they aren't playing any games? Yes.
Smart. Here's a chance for Heatley. He scores!
Only 2 Oilers represent their countries in Vancouver. Both defensemen, Lubomir Visnovsky for Slovakia and Denis Grebeshkov for Russia. They'd both earned their spots, especially Visnovsky, who had been a rare bright spot for Edmonton and helped Slovakia to their best ever Olympic finish when they fell in the bronze medal game. Grebeshkov apparently impressed Nashville GM David Poile, who traded a second-round pick to the Oilers for the defenseman before either team's season resumed. Strangely, the 2 teams returned to action against each other the next day, and Grebeshkov, of course, had a goal and an assist and was named the first star in the Predators' 4-3 victory. The deadline falls on the next day, March 3rd, and the Oilers sell off their other Olympian, Lubo Visnovsky, to the Anaheim Ducks, but it's not for futures. In return for their number 1 defenseman, the Oilers receive Ryan Whitney, a big, productive 26-year-old defenseman who has played a very large role on an okay Ducks team. Whitney wasn't as much of a factor for the Ducks as they might have hoped when they acquired him from the Penguins for Chris Kunitz, so a change in scenery could help the defenseman get back to 50-point form. Steve Staios, another defenseman and one of the few remaining pieces of the Western Conference champion team, is shipped to Calgary of all places for 7th defenseman Aaron Johnson and a 3rd-round pick. Finally, the Oilers snag winger Ryan Jones off waivers, who is an NHL player.
Well, he just said welcome to oil country.
The Oilers have a game the night of the deadline against the dominant Blackhawks. Whitney and Johnson won't be in Edmonton in time for the game. Who exactly is going to play defense? There's Dean Arsene, a 29-year-old playing his 3rd NHL game, 22-year-old prospects Taylor Chorney and Theo Peckham, who are not at all ready for this level, Johan Motin, a 20-year-old playing in his first and last NHL game and hadn't been playing particularly well in the AHL, Jason Strudwick, who was a fringe defenseman in his prime and is now 34, and of course, Tom Gilbert, the lone defenseman dressed for the Oilers tonight that doesn't stink. The Oilers get outshot 47-14. They lose 5-2, and Edmonton was lucky to score twice. Huey wasn't very good. The Nilsson, Gagner, Penner line is all they have. At least next game they'll have a couple more actual NHL players. They do win against the Wild in their next contest, a game stolen by Jeff Delorier, whose only goal against is a beautiful wraparound from Guillaume Letendre. Delorier hasn't been good this year, but when the Oilers win, it's because he's stealing games, which doesn't reflect very well on the team in front of him. While this is a completely lost season, the Oilers show some positive signs as they hobble toward the finish line. Dustin Penner is a first-line winger. He's very good. And his running mate, Sam Gagner, while occasionally struggling to produce, looks well on his way to becoming a top 6 center. Andrew Cogliano has been revived. After scoring only 14 points in his first 62 games, he puts up 14 in his last 18, playing all 82 games for the third time in as many seasons. A major part of the Oilers' resurgence to mediocrity is Ryan Whitney. He fits in better than Wisnowski, and Pat Quinn trusts him more. He and Gilbert put up 11 and 17 points respectively in the Oilers' final 15 games. They look to be the foundation of the defense moving forward. As the Oilers get beaten senseless in their final game of the season by the Ducks, there is a glimmer of hope. There is also an underlying odor of mismanagement. Sheldon Souray has gone through the ringer over the past few months after breaking his hand in January. As he elaborated years later on John Scott's Dropping the Gloves podcast, he asked the Oilers for permission to get the surgery from a doctor in Los Angeles, where he lives in the offseason, over the Olympic break. Management denied him, requiring him to get the surgery in Edmonton. Souray gets the surgery in Edmonton, but when he goes back to Los Angeles, his doctor says the pins they put in his hand are missing caps and are catching on his skin, so the doctor puts them on. Souray then heads back to Edmonton, expecting to be cleared soon to rejoin the team. But as he's getting ready, he sees the pins pushing their way out of his skin. He pushes them back in and moves on. Soon after, the defenseman falls extremely ill with a fever and heads to the hospital. Somewhere along the line, he had developed a staph infection that threatened amputation.
I got a bone and a blood infection, and they're talking about amputating my hand. They have to recut my hand open. They cut from my middle finger down to about here at the end of my palm on both sides.
As he lay in the hospital bed in Edmonton talking to the Oilers' strength coach, Souray asked if the coach had told management. The coach relayed that management thought he was milking the injury so that he wouldn't have to be an Oiler anymore. Souray, pumped full of all sorts of medications, called and left what we can presume were unpleasant voicemails for Kevin Lowe and Daryl Cates. At season's end meetings, Steve Tambellini told Souray he should apologize to Cates and the two argue, resulting in Souray saying it would probably be best that he play somewhere else. The next day, Souray's trade request was made public and was framed not as an ugly divorce, but as a tantrum. To Sportsnet's Mark Spector, Souray encapsulated not just his situation, but the situation with the team at large. I still have 2 years left on my contract. I made a commitment to come here when other guys wouldn't, he said. But you talk about Prongs, Chris Pronger, and guys like that, and it should raise an eyebrow when players who leave town are skipping out with a smile on their face. This isn't just about the temperature of the city. There are greater problems here. There are organizational problems. Pat Quinn will try to improve the culture and management as he is promoted out of the coaching job while Tom Rennie takes the reins. Rennie had done a fine job in his last coaching gig with the Rangers, but never really got the success you would have expected from the combination of Jaromir Jagr and Henrik Lundqvist. He's a decent, but uninspiring hire. In brighter news, the Oilers finishing last in the league by 12 points gives them the most ping-pong balls in the draft lottery. And they come through. The Oilers will pick first overall.
In franchise history, will have the number 1 pick. Let us go to the reaction in Edmonton. They haven't had a lot to celebrate.
At the top of the draft are 2 franchise-altering forwards, a deadly goal-scoring center, and a dynamic play-driving winger, Tyler Seguin and Taylor Hall. Sagan captured the OHL MVP, while Hall won the Memorial Cup and its MVP. Sagan exploded onto the scene here in his draft-eligible season, while Hall has had more of a proven track record, but a more boring development curve. They are both not just NHL ready, but ready to slot into the top 6 for any team that missed the playoffs. Boston, the owner of the number 2 pick thanks to some poor dealings by the Leafs, will be perfectly happy to take whichever player falls to them. The Oilers can't make a wrong choice here.
Extremely excited to select from the Windsor Spitfires, Taylor Hall.
Taylor Hall will be the face of the new era of Oilers hockey.
It's a great thing to make the first pick, to have the first pick. It's not like we want to do it every year, mind you.
But he won't be alone. Jordan Eberle and Magnus Paajarvi are both ready to take the step to the NHL at 20 and 19, respectively. They'll of course join Sam Gagner, who despite his 3 seasons of NHL experience, won't turn 21 until August.
A bouncing puck that comes to Gagner! He scores!
These 4 form a Mount Rushmore of young forwards that will lead this team out of the dark ages. Despite player development, this offseason will mostly be about which players the Oilers lose. Unsigned prospect Riley Nash was sent off at the draft for an extra second rounder, and Patrick O'Sullivan is shipped to Arizona for nondescript bottom pairing defenseman Jim Vandermeer. They don't really sign any free agents, which does show that management is starting to understand the situation. Defenseman Curtis Foster is really it, and he's pretty good value coming off a nice season, coming in at just under $2 million per year for the next 2 years. Other than that, the next most exciting guy is probably enforcer Steve McIntyre or veteran insurance goalie Martin Gerber. Pisani, Comrie, and Patulny all find new homes, and sadly, so does Robert Nilsson, who heads to the KHL, bringing his NHL career to a close. Since no trade could be found, Souray is damned to the AHL, and not even the Oilers farm team. He's been loaned to the Hershey Bears to keep him away from the Oilers prospects. Most shocking of all is the departure of captain Ethan Morrow, who is claimed off waivers by Columbus.
Busting in, Morrow with a shot, scores!
It's the day before opening night that the Oilers named their new captain, a member of the old guard, and for that matter, the second oldest skater on the team at just 32, Sean Horkoff.
Sean Horkoff will be your new captain of the Edmonton Oilers.
There's electricity in the air at Rexall Place for opening night against the Flames. Immediately, Hall and Eberle have an energy to their game that's been missing for the past 4 years. I can't overstate just how much better this team looks compared to last year. Then, Jordan Eberle makes his mark.
Couldn't solve Khabibulin. A 2-on-1 now. Eberle right in on goal. Drags the puck. Backhand. Scores! What a beautiful goal!
Maybe it's just for tonight, but this is a team reborn. 4-0 victory. The finally healthy Khabibulin notches a shutout, and Hemsky fires home his first since 2009.
Shoots and scores!
Game 2, the Oilers muster only 13 shots, but manage to torture the normally stalwart Tomas Vokoun and pull out a win. 13 shots. Uh-oh. But anyway, 2-0. Over the next 16 games, they will double that win total.
Now here's a chance for Taves, cutting in, shooting, scores! Jonathan Taves fired it right through the 5-hole from a tough angle.
The Khabibulin was a lie. He's not good at all. Dubnyk has been definitively better, but they won't play him. It doesn't help that the Oilers have outshot their opponents 1 time this season, but still, Khabibulin has an .879 save percentage and has played 15 of the Oilers' 18 games. What are we doing? The kids are producing decently enough, but they're in over their heads. The defense isn't very good, which makes sense given they traded all their defensemen last season. Foster and Whitney, though productive, have horrible defensive impacts that outweigh their strong offense. This team, unfortunately, still stinks. It stinks in a slightly more fun way, but they still stink.
And clearly you can tell.
Peckham come off the bench. I think he might have come off.
They do manage to win 5 of 6 in late November and early December, doing most of it without Hemsky, who can't stay healthy, dipping in and out of the lineup. Still a paragon of production, but an oft-battered one, struggling primarily with concussions. Their record is now a semi-respectable 11, 12, and 5. Not good, but it looks like a sign of progress. It most definitely is not. A look at this team's expected goals percentage at 5-on-5 to this point is an unfathomably bad 41.4%. This mark is well south of the 2020 worst team in the cap era Red Wings and nearing the 2015 Tankathon Sabres. They're being saved by shooting 10.5%, a 1.5 higher than what will be the league average. It doesn't take a genius to realize this isn't sustainable. Over the next 28 games, the Oilers hurtle into oblivion, notching only 5 wins. Whitney can barely move due to an ankle injury for the first part of the span before his season mercifully ends when he gets surgery. Horcoff misses most of December and January. Eberle misses nearly the entire month of January between an ankle injury and an appendix removal. Just loss after loss. Really, the lone bright spot is Devan Dubnyk. He looks pretty decent and is responsible for 4 of the 5 wins, including a shutout against the Predators. He's probably the goalie of the future, especially since Delorier has been unable to dig himself out of the AHL, even being passed up for NHL starts by Martin Gerber. But, oh boy, Habibulin looks washed. He signed for how many more years? The kids aren't tremendous, but they aren't concerning, which is good. Everyone, Hall, Eberle, Pajärvi, and even new call-up Linus Omark all look perfectly fine, if unremarkable in terms of production.
The defenders, Pajärvi drives, one-handed, he scores!
As the deadline approaches, the Oilers don't really have any traditional rental pieces to send out, but they do have some tough calls to make. Hemsky and Penner, the 2 best players on this team, both only have 1 year remaining on their contracts after this season. Hemsky's injuries generally keep a wet blanket on any trade proposals, but Penner is all over the rumor mill. Penner is especially linked to the Kings, with young power forward Wayne Simmons or big right-handed D-man Colten Teubert seen as part of a likely return. Simmons brings a lot of what Penner does, just with an aging curve that lines up better with the Oilers given he's only 22. Teubert hasn't even turned 21 yet, and was the 13th overall pick in 2008. Though he was seen as a second-tier guy in what was a strong draft for D-men, he could really shore up what has become a painfully bad D-core. Former top 5 picks Braden Shen and Thomas Hickey seem a little out of the price range, but possible. Regardless, it feels like this trade is happening. The Kings are at a power-out stage of their rebuild after a successful 2010 and have tons of prospects, so a lot of these guys aren't going. Finally, after all the build-up, Penner heads out to Los Angeles in exchange for Colten Teubert, a first-round pick in 2011, and a third-round pick in 2012. In terms of value, this is right around what the Oilers gave up to get Penner from the Ducks. It's a good trade. The Oilers get futures, and the Kings get a bona fide top 6 guy. Alright, Steve. Not bad.
Saturday, look at that! I'm in a free car! You can get one on Saturday, every Saturday, always on Saturdays. This is all free!
In early March, essentially all the interesting Oilers get hurt and have their seasons end. First, Hemsky, luckily not another concussion but a shoulder injury. Then Taylor Hall, who picks up a goal and an assist against Columbus, then gets in an ill-advised fight with Blue Jackets tough guy Derek Dorsett, completing the Gordie Howe hat trick, but torquing his leg badly when the two fall to the ice. He's done. Sam Gagner caught a teammate's skate to the hand against the Capitals and finished the game, but would need surgery that would end his year. And finally, Sean Horcoff would be ruled out with a hairline fracture in his foot. The Oilers are now riding Pajärvi, Eberle, Cogliano, Omark, and Jones for north of 20 minutes per night. It goes about as well as you'd expect.
Hammers pack them into the boards.
The Oilers win just 2 of their final 12 games. They're actually an improved possession team, but all of their finishers are either injured or traded away. In a particularly bad loss to the Flames, Edmonton allows a hat trick to Jarome Iginla and goals to Rene Bourque, Alex Tanguay, and Curtis Glencross. All 4 of these guys are north of 20 goals. The only Oilers that scored 20 goals were Penner and Hall. Obviously, neither of these guys are in the lineup. The Oilers' highest surviving goal scorer is last year's waiver claim Ryan Jones with 18. The Oilers wrap up their season with 62 points, the exact same total as last season. They're actually worse, netting 2 fewer wins, but they lost in overtime more often. Hooray. The Oilers are, once again, the league's worst team by a wide margin, 6 points back of the 29th place Avalanche. The Oilers are poised to pick first yet again, and yet again the lottery balls fall in their favor. It's not a great draft. There isn't a player at the top with the pedigree of Hall or Sagan, but there are some good players here. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had led the WHL in assists and finished tied third in points. Jonathan Huberdeau had won MVPs for both the QMJHL and Memorial Cup playoffs while he finished third in the Q in points. And Adam Larsson had been a mainstay shutdown defenseman in the Swedish Elite League since he was 17. The Oilers pick is in.
The Edmonton Oilers are so proud to select from the Red Deer Rebels, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
Nuge is a great fit for this team. They have finishing wingers and are in desperate need of centers as Horkoff fades. RNH and Gagner look poised to be a 1-2 punch down the middle for years to come. With the Penner pick, 19th overall, the Oilers take rangy Swedish defenseman Oscar Klefbom. He's not NHL ready, so he doesn't immediately address anything, but he projects to be a strong two-way guy. Following the draft, it's time for a reunion. In a salary dump by the Kings, and partly due to a player request, the Oilers obtain Ryan Smith in exchange for fourth-liner Colin Fraser and a 7th-round pick. Smith is in the final year of a pretty expensive contract that pays him $6.25 million per year, but the Oilers have plenty of cap space. At 34, Smith isn't the player the Oilers traded 4 years ago, but he's still a gritty, effective secondary scorer coming off 3 straight 20-goal campaigns. The Oilers, if everyone stays healthy and continues to develop, have a legitimate top 6. There's a decent amount of action in Edmonton on July 1st. Curtis Foster is traded for more stability on defense in the massive Andy Sutton. The Sheldon Souray saga finally ends as he signs with Dallas. And the Oilers sign some depth guys, veteran punchers Ben Eager and Darcy Hordichuk, some buy-low defensemen in Cam Barker and Corey Potter, and, more importantly, a new third-line center, Eric Belanger, a guy you can pencil in for 15-ish goals and 35-ish points every year. The Belanger signing doesn't signal good things for the ongoing negotiations with arbitration-eligible RFA center Andrew Cogliano. Sure enough, a week and a half later, Cogliano is sent to the Ducks for a 2nd-round pick. His development had stalled over the past few years, settling in as a 15-ish goal, 35-ish point guy, but he'll end up being slightly more expensive than Belanger. The move makes some sense, though Cogliano obviously lines up much better with the team's timeline than Belanger. The 2nd-rounder could make up for that. That's about it for the offseason. Finally, some stability. This is the first time in 4 years the Oilers will go through an offseason without a change in coach, owner, GM, or captain. Does Tom Rennie inspire much confidence? No, but you can't just change coaches every year. On opening night, the Oilers' starting lineup is announced in order of number, starting with number 4, Taylor Hall. Second to last is number 93, the rookie, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who gets a warm welcome. But the last player gets a standing ovation.
Ryan Smith!
The Oilers are stymied by the Malkin and Crosby-less Penguins and their backup goalie Brent Johnson through 55 minutes. But it's time for the new guy to make his mark.
Hopkins with a chance, and a chance, he scores! He said it! Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, his first National Hockey League goal!
Ryan Smith's return night ends just moments later when he throws his forearm into the head of an oncoming Chris Kunitz, earning him 5 in a game. The Oilers are in a tough situation, but their penalty kill and Devin Dubnyk hold strong, pushing the game to a shootout where Ales Hemsky nets the winner. The Oilers wrap up their first 6 games at 2-2-2. The good news is they're averaging only 2 goals against per game, with only the defending Western Conference champion Canucks scoring beyond that marker. The bad news is they're averaging less than 2 goals per game. Nuge seems to be the only guy that remembers how to score, with 4 of the team's 11 goals and a hat trick against the Canucks in just his 3rd game. Then the Oilers wake up, reeling off 6 straight wins. They hand the Capitals their first loss of the year. They beat the Canucks. Well, 2 of those games they didn't break 20 shots. They still only have a 46% expected goals percentage. Their goalies had a .967 save percentage. Shut up. I do not care. I just want this team to not suck. They dropped 5 of their next 6 as goaltending regresses. Both Khabibulin and Dubnyk have some nasty starts, but that's all washed away as the Oilers dumpster a very good Blackhawks team 9-2. Taylor Hall scores a hat trick. Nuge gathers 5 assists. Eberle and Gilbert log 4 points each. Relative newcomer Jeff Petrie, a mid-season call-up from last season that has shown a lot of promise as a hard-nosed, hard-shooting defenseman, notches 3 assists of his own. Smith scores his 11th goal of the season in what is only the Oilers' 19th game, and Hemsky finally gets his first on a great individual effort. A statement win, and they did it all without 4 of their normal starting defensemen.
Eberle with Gilbert on the blue line. To the circle now. Nugent Hopkins in front. Rebound. Hall scores!
Potter, Barker, Whitney, and Sutton were all absent, drawing in names like waiver loss, then claimed Taylor Chorney, and probably not ready Colten Teubert. They dropped the next game to the Stars, but stay strong with decisive wins against the Predators and Wild. RNH to this point in the season has been the Oilers' best player, with 10 goals and 24 points through their first 22 games, all while centering the top line. That production is especially good because both Belanger and Gagner have been no-shows. Gagner is coming back from a cut hand ligament that cost him the end of last season and the start of this one. He can use that as an excuse. Belanger has not been as advertised, not even supplying the defensive impact he had in the past. Neither player has a goal yet this season. A lot of that weight has fallen on Sean Horkoff's shoulders, who has risen to the task so far with 7 goals and 16 points.
Hemsky turns, Falk down, out in front, Horkoff scores!
Then the Oilers hit the skids, losing 20 of their next 25 games. There are a lot of things that can be pointed at as the problem. The goaltending falters again, but most of that blame can be placed on the beaten to a pulp decor. Khabibulin and Dubnyk have been perfectly good as they share starts. The finishing talent is lacking on this team, especially past the top 2 lines, but even on them. Smith and Horkoff start to run cold, which puts all the weight on Eberle, who is plenty productive, but he can't be the only guy that scores. Nuge, Hall, and Hemsky weren't drafted as scorers. They're playmakers, transition drivers. They need people to put the puck in the net. Strangely, this team is missing the net a ton. Their Fenwick percentage, which counts both shots and misses, is dead even at 50%, but they're only controlling 46% of the actual shots on goal. They don't have the shooters to hang with teams. There are just so many guys on this team that aren't good. In the past years, the Oilers have had a lot of okay players, but not a lot of guys that had the oomph to put them over the top. Now they have the opposite problem. For them to be really competitive, yes, they probably need another scorer at the top of the lineup. But Jordan Eberle and Nugent Hopkins have been terrific. Taylor Hall has looked good. Hemsky and Smith can still play. These are legitimate top-of-the-lineup players, but the bottom of the lineup is just full of nothing. Tom Rennie has been inexplicably trying to play 20-year-old Anton Lander every night, and he is not even remotely ready. And they're making the kid kill penalties. Poor Magnus Pajärvi, after his strong rookie season, has disappeared to the point of being sent down to the AHL. There's this guy Lennart Petrell they signed from Liga in Finland. He wasn't really that great over there, but he's in the lineup every night. At least he can kill penalties. Then there's the goons. Theo Peckham has been horrible, but at least he's young, and there have been a bunch of injuries on D. Okay. It's the 2 free agent signings that really boil my blood. Darcy Hordichuk has played most of the games this season. He's averaging 4 minutes per night. He has an assist. Ben Eager has a whopping 7 points so far and is playing 8 minutes per night. Woohoo! They both take tons of penalties, and it's not like they're all fighting majors. This team finally let Zach Stortini and Steve McIntyre go and thought to themselves, you know what we need? More guys that suck. You gave Eager term. He's getting over $1 million per year for 2 more years after this. What are we doing?
Then he finally turns the tables. Now he starts throwing.
The Oilers stopped the bleeding, winning 2 of 3 for the first time in 2 months, and are headed into a matchup with the Blackhawks. They did stomp the Hawks earlier in the season, but the two teams' last meeting cost Edmonton their leading rookie point scorer, putting cold water on RNH's Calder campaign. This is still a pretty beat-up Oilers squad, but maybe they can salvage some dignity with a big win over a good team. Things don't look great when Dubnyk gives up a goal to Jamal Mayers on what seems like a non-threatening shot.
Mayers works his way in, long shot, scores! Mayers fires that.
Early in the second, the struggling Ryan Smith commits a painful turnover to Patrick Kane, who feeds Patrick Sharp to give the Hawks a 2-0 advantage. The TSN broadcast flashes up that Smith only has one goal in his last 12 games. But the Oilers answer quickly. Sam Gagner threads a beautiful stretch pass to Taylor Hall, who cuts into the Hawks' lead.
Pass for Taylor Hall, shoots, scores!
Gagner dazzles again to tie the game, gathering a broken-up pass for a wraparound and dunking the puck past a surprised Corey Crawford. A few minutes later on the power play, Gagner loses the puck on a deke attempt and it rattles out to Ryan Whitney, who blasts home his long-awaited first of the season to take a 3-2 lead. But Patrick Sharp strikes back after a Hemsky pinch led to a Chicago shorthanded 2-on-1.
Taves with Sharp. Jonathan Taves in, shoots, rebound, Sharp scores! Short-handed goal, Chicago!
Early in the third, chaos breaks out in the Blackhawks zone, and a blast from Whitney bounces out to Gagner, who cashes in again for his 4th point of the night, his high mark on the season. Just 2 minutes later, Gagner wins a faceoff to Andy Sutton, who drives uncharacteristically to the net, then shuffles a pass out to former Blackhawk Cam Barker, who whips a shot on goal that Crawford just misses. 5-3 Oilers. Dave Bolin brings the Hawks within 1, but less than 30 seconds later, Taylor Hall throws a pass to who else but Sam Gagner, who completes his hat trick.
Centers it, Gagner shoots, scores! Hat trick, Sam Gagner!
With 5 minutes remaining, Eberle this time finds the hottest hand in Alberta, who buries number 4. Less than 90 seconds later, Gagner returns the favor, and in assisting Eberle's goal, makes history. It was Sam's 8th point of the night, the first 8-point game since Mario Lemieux accomplished the feat in a completely different era. Mario's 8-pointer was in the midst of his legendary 199-point 1989 season, a season where the league average save percentage was a paltry .877. Taking all of the 8-plus point games since the league started tracking shots, Daryl Sittler's 10-pointer came in the most challenging scoring climate, with a league average save percentage of .889. The league average here in 2012? .911. Gagner's feat is truly unlike anything the league has ever seen, as he joins Wayne Gretzky and Paul Coffey as the only Oilers to reach the mark. Sam buries 2 more goals and adds an assist in the Oilers' next game, a shootout win against the Red Wings, setting the Oilers' record for most points over 2 games with 11. This season has had its highs and lows, mostly the latter, but here, these last 2 games, there is something for the organization and fans to truly be happy about. Another positive comes 3 weeks later as Ales Hemsky signs a 2-year contract extension worth $5 million per year. Hemsky's had a tough season with only 26 points in 47 games, well below his standard of close to a point per game, which likely brings the salary down. It's a smart deal for both sides. The term of 2 years gives the Oilers some time to finish the rebuild. If the team is competitive by then, Hemsky would likely re-sign. If they aren't, he won't. It shows the time frame that Steve Tambellini has placed on the process. This team feels almost ready. At the time of the February 27th trade deadline, the Oilers are well out of it at 24-31-6, but they once again don't have any classic rental pieces. Instead, they make a strange trade. Tom Gilbert, who has been far and away the Oilers' strongest defenseman, has seen his offense fade from the heights of his rookie and sophomore seasons, shifting to a more defensive style and a shutdown pairing with Ladislav Smid. In a sudden move, Gilbert has been traded to the Wild in exchange for defensive defenseman Nick Schultz. Schultz has a much lower offensive ceiling than Gilbert, but he's very steady and has played well when paired with other lockdown defensemen like Clayton Stoner or Jared Spurgeon. It's a big bet by the Oilers on Ryan Whitney's health and Jeff Petry's continued development. Frankly, it's a bet on the development of the entire team. Gilbert could have fetched a decent haul of draft picks. Kyle Quincy got a first and Johnny Oduya got a second and third. Gilbert has a slightly larger contract than these guys, but he's just as good a player and is signed for 2 seasons after this one. Going and getting a 29-year-old instead of gathering more prospects is bold. We'll see how it goes. Schultz immediately clicks with Whitney, and the two anchor Edmonton's defense as they continue to be perfectly meh. 8, 10, and 4 in their final 22 games, most of which is without Hall, who has his season ended early yet again, bringing the Oilers' record to a bad but not horrific 32, 40, and 10. Hall took steps forward in another good season. RNH had a great rookie campaign. He'll finish second in Calder voting. He likely would have won it had he stayed healthy. But this was Jordan Eberle's year. 34 goals and 76 points while only racking up 10 penalty minutes as he finishes second for the Lady Byng. The Oilers needed him to be the trigger man, and he delivered.
Behind the net, walks out in front, takes a shot, hits her, and now he goes upstairs and scores!
The goaltending seems perfectly acceptable, but unremarkable. As promising as the kids were, the veterans were concerning. After a molten start, Ryan Smith fell off a cliff with only 7 goals in his last 60 games, finishing with fewer than 20 goals in a healthy season for the first time since the 90s. And I already talked about Hemsky's struggles. Horkoff and his massive contract have officially entered albatross conversations as the captain put up 6 goals and only 14 points in his last 54 games. The Oilers can hope this is a fluke, but it's likely a trend. They can't afford half of their top 6 to fade like this. Despite the Oilers finishing merely second to last this season, the lottery balls hit again. For the 3rd year in a row, the Oilers will pick first. Unlike the last 2 years, there's a consensus number 1. There's no discussion as to who the Oilers will pick. A deadly forward who tore up the OHL as a 17-year-old and then again as an 18-year-old. He just barely missed the cutoff for the last draft. Had he been eligible, he'd likely have been picked above Nugent Hopkins. This kid will be the final piece of the puzzle. On June 22nd, the Oilers will select Nail Yakupov.
I don't know. You can give me like 100 questions, but we win. Russia win. Russia better Canada, so see you next time.